Due to the subject and language matter of this program, which some may find offensive, viewer discretion is advised.
Tonight on Rock and Roll.
People thought we were being very negative and bleak.
The darker side of life starts creeping into rock music.
We were like the stakes, right through the heart, because we were right at the end of Peace and Love.
The Velvet Underground, David Bowie, Iggy Pop and the Doors. Next. Funding for Rock and Roll is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the annual financial support of viewers like you. The Experience Music Project, a celebration of creativity and innovation through American popular music and culture, opening in Seattle in 1998. The National Endowment for the Arts.
Radio Shack, with its line of Optimus audio equipment, official sponsor of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum.
And by the Boston Beer Company, brewers of Samuel Adams. Do you love beer?
Coming in from London from over the pole, flying in a big airliner.
In the late 1960s, the Woodstock generation thought it could change the world through its music and its philosophy of peace and love. But as that dream started to fade, new musicians emerged to challenge that optimism, sometimes aggressively. Using the rock stage almost as a theater, they acted out the fantasies and insecurities of themselves and their audiences in a more uncertain age.
The drug of choice in the New York inner circles in the late 60s was amphetamine. Acid had a hard time catching on because New York is not the prettiest place in the world. You want to do acid someplace where it's pretty and you can talk to God and see trees and, flowers and go back to the organic beginnings of things.
Standing on the corner, suitcase in my hand.
In the mid-60s, a young songwriter, fascinated by the tough street culture of New York City, joined a group of avant-garde musicians who would push rock and roll in new directions. He was born Louis Furbank in 1942.
I had a real problem with authority, always have. I had a real problem with being able to hold a job, a normal job. I only had, I think, 3 in my life. Some lasted a half hour and some half a day. I'd often thought, like, what are you going to do for a job? You can't do anything. And I fell into the band thing.
We're sponsoring a new band. It's called the Velvet Underground.
And he wanted to disturb people and shake it up, so did we.
And we have this chance to combine music and art and films all together.
When the Velvet Underground started in 1966, they were considered a stunt group formed by Andy Warhol for publicity. Although they would sell only a handful of records during their short time together, the band would inspire a whole new movement in rock and roll, both with their attitude and their sound.
Down your sins, up street light fancies, chase the costumes she shall wear.
What I was really trying to do was to try and get a full Spector sound by taking the harmonic basis, the real bare bones of a song, and finding out whether one chord would work throughout the whole song. And when it finally paid off, when we had one rehearsal there on Ludlow Street, and it was very exciting because we knew that there was something that set us apart from everybody else. Because this song that we'd worked on, Venus in Furs, had gone through a number of folk rock variations, and all of a sudden it was in the grip of this kind of orchestral and sinuous noise that we had going. It's very sexy.
I love Raymond Chandler. That blonde was as pleasant as a split lip. His manicure made his thumb look like a glistening ice cube. Yeah, it's those incredible images in this very, very simple language. And I thought a rock and roll song that contained that kind of language would be just fantastic.
When I put a spike into my vein, and I tell you things aren't quite the same.
At the time, people thought we were being very negative and bleak and dark and anti, whereas as the lyricist, I thought we were an accurate reflection of segments of New York that you can't ignore and things that were happening and were going to happen on a larger scale.
That's Waiting for My Man. Everybody's doing that throughout the song. That's, I think, what I like so much about the song. It's like a train. It just starts and off it goes.
Released in the same year as Sgt. Pepper, the Velvet Underground album was almost universally ignored. What attracted more notice was the exploding plastic inevitable, the stage show that accompanied their live performances, an assault on the audience of dancers acting out sadomasochistic fantasies to accompanying strobe lights.
You killed your European son. You spit on those under 21.
In May 1966, the band decided to take the show to the heart of the enemy.
When we first came to California, I had never been here before, of course. Andy had. And his analogy was, oh, it's so plastic. He loved it. He loved California.
You want to make love to the scene. Your European son is gone. You better say so long.
The audience was fine, but the critics and the club owners, the music people, didn't like us at
all. So this is this terrible, terrible influence of the virus and disease of New York City into the beautiful new counterculture of the West Coast.
I think generally that we just felt happy in being ostracized by both the West Coast and by the Woodstock generation.
We, at the end of the show, if I could call it a show, we got into feedback, and we were all leaning guitars and everything against the amps, and it made this wall of feedback, and we left the stage.
The Velvets were considered too extreme at the time ever to achieve commercial success, and one by one the members of the band went separate ways. However, a young film student had seen them in San Francisco and was inspired to start writing songs himself back in Los Angeles with his band, The Doors.
I'm a spy in the house of love. I know the dream that you're dreaming of.
Although Jim Morrison lived in the heart of Los Angeles, in the hippie community of Laurel Canyon, he was never really part of the Love generation. Unlike the Velvet Underground, The Doors would become very successful as they explored similar themes of confrontation and sexuality.
Robbie Krieger.
Name?
John Densmore.
Name?
Raymond Daniel Manzar.
Name? Jim. Occupation.
Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah.
For Break On Through, their first single released in 1967, the Doors used their filmmaking skills to shoot their own promotional movie.
This is the campus at UCLA. This is where I first met Jim Morrison. We were film students in 62 to 64. The idea of making a film is a dramatic structure, and I think the fact that Jim went to the film school, I went to the film school at UCLA, carried over into our music. It gave us a sense of drama.
Come on, turn the lights on. Turn them way down.
The End, obviously, is a song that works through a great deal of dramatic peaks and valleys, if you will. It starts off very softly, and it's a love song at the beginning. This is the end. It's a goodbye song. It's Jim singing goodbye to a girl.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end.
Then the music begins to build and build in intensity, and there becomes a whirling dervish part. The tempo of the song increases. Now this is the dramatic structure again of a film, increasing in structure, increasing in editing, increasing in intensity with which the Doors are playing.
This was the genesis of the stage, rock stage, as a dramatic event. Before that, you had your stage lights, a follow spot, people got up there, performed their material, sometimes waved their arms a little bit, but there was no drama. The Doors brought drama.
In the 60s, at the time, it was an interesting sort of theatrical style. It had come out of the theater of the absurd, which was a very funny, humorous, theatrical movement in the 50s, and had turned into a kind of a confrontational theater. And Morrison picked up a great deal of his way of confronting the audience from Julian Beck and the Living Theater.
If one can make the spectator really feel some pain objectively in a public ceremony, it may open the door to further feeling. That may be the route through which we can again find our feelings.
Morrison took Julian Beck's message to heart and created his persona of the threatening Lizard King, prepared to do anything to provoke an audience out of what he saw as its apathy.
When the music's over, turn up the light, turn up the light, turn up the light.
It had gotten to the point where Jim realized that he had an enormous power. Not just the power to move people emotionally, but to move them politically. And not so much in the politic of the time. That's not what he was interested in. He was more interested in the politic of the insane.
All right for you, baby.
He started playing with that on stage to see, what can I do to this audience? Can I whip it to hysteria? Can I whip it to insanity? Can I activate the madness of crowds to my ends? And he got pretty good at it.
You're all a bunch of idiots!
Interestingly, that Jim had gone to 6 performances in a row of Julian Beck's Living Theater in Los Angeles about a week or two before the Miami concert took place. And they had taken their clothes off on stage, I'm not allowed to walk naked, etc., 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 all kinds of things. Jim was going to do the same thing in Miami.
Come up here and love my ass, come on! Yeah! I love you!
As president of the Greater Miami Crime Commission, I'm calling upon the Dade County Grand Jury and the State Attorney's Office to immediately take criminal action against those that were responsible for the deplorable condition and situation when the group known as the Doors attempted to precipitate a riot.
We have taken out 2 warrants for Jim Morrison. One of them is for indecent exposure.
In the trial, there are 250 photographs entered, a stack of photographs this high at the trial. Photos of everything that was going on at the concert. Not one photo of the ivory shaft appeared. So I doubt if it happened, but I think it was a mass hallucination. I think it was something like the Vision of Lourdes or something like that, is what happened in Miami.
The Miami concert would mark the effective end of the Doors' career as a live band. Morrison had started to live out his rock god persona, dangerously close to the edge. He died mysteriously in a hotel in Paris in 1971. Another performer would emerge from the Midwest near Detroit to assume Jim Morrison's mantle and wear the leather trousers. He too would challenge the audience in an extreme and physical way.
It was another year for me and you, another year with nothing to do.
I think what was cool about where I grew up was that there was so much wild space around. I used to spend most of my time, my free time every day, I would go out in the corn and make up games. I grew up in a mobile home, actually a series of them. The one when I was little was in a mobile home court of about 100 trailers. And I think the solitude and time, the Midwestern, where I was, gave me an ability to concentrate and to imagine that would make me able to do the job later when it came up. I dropped out of college and went to try to play the blues because I liked this kind of music. And it didn't take me long to figure out that, you know, I wasn't middle-aged, I wasn't black, and I wasn't from Mississippi. But how about if I could take those ideas but do that from the point of view of our life back in Michigan?
Since we broke away for our message, Iggy has been in the crowd and out again 3 different times. They seem to be enjoying it, and so does he.
Get all right! Get all right!
We seem to have lost him, and we're trying to get a light on him now.
The Doors were very key for us. I would listen a lot to what he was doing, and the Velvet Underground, who were very, very, very avant and very key for us at the time. But still, it was mainly about clang bang, clang 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 bang bang bang, loud and annoying. And the more annoying it was, the better. And then the added element was to find something monolithic, simple, metallic, just like a big machine. And the way I got into that was because you'd go to the Ford plant and you watch the drill press. And that's such a great sound. And each one is another Fender, you know. And it was just, I thought, God, those are impressive sounds, big sounds, and they're so regular and simple. I thought those are sounds that even we could master. At first we just have any old riff that was okay, and we'd go along and play it for a while, and I'd sing whatever came into my head, and I would change the song every month. And I would act it out and dance around, and I was taking my feeling and my dances from a combination of the things I felt when I was walking around on drugs, the things that I saw American Indians do, and also dances that I'd seen done in Chicago at the blues bars. You had rowdy elements in the audiences in Michigan, and also you had kind of resistant elements. And so I started mixing it up with the crowd, and if they wouldn't give me what I wanted, I would go out and take the show to them.
No fun, my babe, no fun.
All sorts of things started happening. Sometimes I would, just for the fun of it, I'd do what little kids do when they want to get attention, which is just stand really still and then pretend I was falling on the floor, except I'd do it falling off a stage and fall on top of somebody. Sometimes I'd lose my clothes, and I got busted for that a couple times. Other times I'd get nicked up myself. Maybe I'd nick myself with a drumstick or something if I was nervous or uncomfortable. Different things would happen. There was a big period when I got into this routine of I would go out and just find the prettiest girl in the crowd and seize her, because it was a great way to meet girls. Basically, you know, I mean, hey, I've got a band, I'm in town, let's get something out of this. I'm not getting paid that much, right? And we started getting a big following, mostly disaffected high school kids, unemployed people, or mentally deranged people. People that come back from Vietnam always liked us.
Iggy, who hero worshipped Morrison, carried his idea of taking the show to the audience just one step further.
That's peanut butter.
But the Stooges' career as a band was dogged by increasing problems with drugs, and their first album, produced by the Velvet Underground's John Cale, sold poorly. Another performer from Detroit would, like Iggy, do things a little differently.
Lines form on my left and right, lines form on my face and hands. I'm in the middle without any plans. I'm a boy and I'm a man. I'm 18.
I'm a boy and I'm a man. I'm 18 and I don't know what I want.
To us, it was a combination of comic books, every RKO horror movie we'd ever seen. We were total students of trivial television. We never read anything that wasn't a cheap novel. You know, I mean, we were really the epitome of the American cultureless society. And all we did was we invented this Frankenstein named Alice Cooper that was really a reflection of that.
I gotta get out of this place. I gotta run it with the hottest.
I think the idea of insulting the middle America by changing your name to Alice Cooper and wearing women's clothes and everybody in the band being dead straight, and instead of being dopers, everybody drank beer. We were all American. We were every bit all American, and all we did was we took all the taboos and just put them on the table. I always say that we were the dagger in the heart of the love generation. You know, we were like the stake right through the heart, because we were right at the end of peace and love, and all of a sudden here was this shiny new horrible monster that was really fun to watch.
What does it take?
We played the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival. There was about 80,000 people outdoors, and nobody had ever heard of us.
Give me a break, yeah.
And we did our normal set. Well, at the end of our show, we always used to take a pillow, and we'd open it up, and we had CO2 cartridges, and we would blow these feathers all over the audience. And one pillow will pretty much cover Madison Square Garden. And we had about 3 or 4 pillows that night. And all the feathers were going, and somebody from the audience threw a chicken on stage. And I picked it up, I figured it's a bird. I'm from Detroit, I don't know, if chicken's got wings, it'll fly. And I threw it back in the audience, figuring it would just fly away. Now it went into the audience, and the audience tore it to pieces. next thing I knew in the paper was Alice Cooper tears chicken to pieces and bites head off and drinks blood. And I get this call the next morning from Frank Zappa, and he says, "Did you do that to the chicken?" I said, "No." He says, "Don't tell anybody." He says, "Everybody loves this story about you and the chicken and everything."
It was a British artist who would develop an even more extreme image of the rock star as a glittery creature from another planet.
Ground control to Major Tom.
7, 6, 5.
Among a number of films that made a deep impression upon me in the 60s, I think one of the most important at the very end was 2001, Stanley Kubrick. It was the sense of isolation that I related to. That, in combination with a number of other elements, set the pattern for a lot of the kinds of music that I wrote and the kind of performances that I gave, and probably predicted my lifestyle for the 70s.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirt you wear.
I was talking with a friend of mine not so long ago who also came from suburbia, and you're given the impression that nothing culturally belongs to you, that you are sort of in this wasteland. And I think there's a passion for most people who have an iota of sort of curiosity about them to escape and get out and try and find who one is and find some kinds of roots, you know. And both of us got out for the same reasons. For exactly that, a desperation and exhaustion with the blandness of where we grew up.
David Jones became David Bowie and trained in theater and mime before recording a series of mainly folk-based albums. Apart from the early success of Space Oddity in 1969, which was regarded at the time as a novelty song, Bowie's records sold poorly until his wife Angie suggested a bold publicity move.
I knew I had a job in there somewhere, and it was a dirty job, but somebody had to do it, and I was the man for it. Or rather, I was the androgyne for it.
Oh, you pretty things, don't you know your job?
Bowie was the first rock star to proclaim publicly that he was bisexual or gay. The reaction became even stronger when he posed for the cover of one album, The Man Who Sold the World, in a dress. Although the album cover was changed by the record company for its U.S. release.
You gotta make way for the Homo superior.
On his first visit to New York, Bowie met Andy Warhol. He drew considerable inspiration from a group of actors associated with Warhol's Factory.
Well, somebody wait for me. Sugar sweet, so easy.
When I was doing Andy Warhol's Pork in New York, they said Pork was nothing but a bunch of naked freaks running around on stage doing perverted acts, you know. We were going, yeah, come see the show. Anyway, when Bowie and Angela came to see Pork and she started to meet all the cast of Pork, people were dyeing their hair purple and green. Lee was coloring his hair with magic markers. We wore fingernail polish out in the clubs. We wore our fingernail polish on the street. We dressed, you know, just as crazy on the street as we did on stage. Angie began to push David in that direction. Without any of that, David would have just continued having long floppy hair and singing folk songs.
Well, I'm up on the 11th floor and I'm watching the cruisers below.
It was not only the Warhol look that began to influence Bowie, it was the New York sound as well.
The Velvet Underground became very important to me. There was this sort of mixture of rock and avant-garde, Cale's influence of avant-garde, and Lou Reed's very fine pop tunesmithism. He was a very fine pop writer, and the combination was so brutal.
While in New York, Bowie got to know Lou Reed, as well as the irrepressible Iggy Pop, who, in imitation of some of the Warhol superstars, had started to cover himself with glitter on stage.
To me, they represented the wild side of existentialist America. And of course, being a sort of a real nutcase about America and American music, that was everything that I thought we should have in England. And I didn't know if we had it in England or not. So at that time, one was borrowing heavily from the American influence. But of course, being filtered through this British system, it came out in more vaudeville, more Robert Smith than MC5.
The result was Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy play guitar, jamming good with Weird and Gilly, and the spiders from Mars.
Ziggy was unveiled to the British public in 1972 in a series of small concerts. Finally, Bowie had found the combination that was going to work.
And then we were Ziggy's band.
Ziggy kind of exploded overnight. I think Ziggy Stardust, David had been working on one way or another for a long time. And it was his sort of alien being, his first of all, Ziggy was an alien being. He was like the stranger that we all feel that we are, except he was very beautiful and very seductive, and people wanted to touch Ziggy. David had been experimenting with a lot of looks, a lot of sounds, a lot of styles. None of them had quite clicked until Ziggy. And I think it was really once he got that haircut, he couldn't go wrong.
Now Ziggy played guitar.
They said he was coming around the back. I've been waiting for ages to see him. 9 o'clock.
Why are you so upset?
He's smashing.
You're David Bowie's wife, right?
Yes, I am.
What's it like with all these girls loving your husband so much?
Absolutely fabulous. Wouldn't you love to be loved by so many?
Bowie's success was due in part to the hard, muscular sound of his guitar player, Mick Ronson, a sound that would help push Bowie to the top of the British charts. But Ronson could also play in a reflective style that gave the Ziggy character a real depth and range.
When I first heard him play, I thought, oh, that's my Jeff Beck. He is fantastic. This kid is great. And so I sort of hoodwinked him into working with him. I didn't quite actually have to tell him in the beginning that we'd have to wear makeup and all that. Because Mick came from Hull, you know, and was very down to earth. As was the rest of the Spider, you know. What do you mean makeup? I said, well, you know, it might sort of... And so I reverted to things like, you looked very green tonight on stage. I think if you wore makeup, you'd probably look a little more natural looking. And sort of lies like this, and gradually got them into sort of, you know, areas of costume and theatre. And actually, when they realised how many girls they could pull when they looked so sort of otherworldly, they took to it like a fish to water.
For me, when I was on stage, I was kind of doing what I had to do, you know. I mean, just as a... I guess what I felt I had to do, what I felt like the way I played, you know. I think a lot of people saw it as a very good sort of counterfoil between me and David, because David would be more delicate and a little more woman-like. And I was kind of like stomping along on the side there, a bit more like a, I can't really say bricklayer, but that's kind of what I mean, you know.
I'm very much a character when I go on stage, I feel.
I mean,
Like an actor?
Yeah, I believe in my part all the way down the line, right the way down. But I do play it for all it's worth, because that's the way I do my stage thing. That's part of what Bowie's supposedly all about. I'm an actor.
I'm a specimen. I'll be a rock and roller bitch.
The chief ingredients were to de-violence the look of Clockwork Orange. Evoke the mystery of kabuki and no theatre. But if you'd asked me at the time what it was I was trying to do, I had simply no idea. All I knew it was, and I sound like a parrot saying this, but it's true, and this otherness, this other world, an alternative reality, one that I really wanted to embrace. I wanted anything but the place that I came from.
Bowie started to rely heavily on his manager, Tony DeFries, who surrounded him with all the extravagances of a major star, despite the fact that there was not always the money to pay for it.
Tony DeFries had this idea that if we just told the world that I was super huge and then treated me as though I were, then something might happen.
In Britain, the strategy worked perfectly. Bowie's album sold extremely well. But in America, the real prize market, it was a different story. RCA Records was looking for someone to beef up their roster, which for years had relied heavily on Elvis. DeFries sold Bowie to them, saying that Bowie would be a new queen of rock and roll, to replace the king. But it soon became clear that a mainstream American audience was not yet ready for a rock star from outer space, with a penchant for cross-dressing. And Ziggy made no impact on the U.S. charts at all.
The whole glam thing, was kind of great for me when I met Bowie, and he was into that, and so I got into that. It was something I had already seen with Warhol, but I hadn't done that then. So the 70s was like a chance for me to get in on it. I mean, that was one of the great things. And I learned that from Andy. You could be anything.
When Bowie met Lou Reed again in New York, Reed was at a low point in his solo career after leaving the Velvet Underground.
David Bowie produced your last 2 albums, is that right?
Oh, no.
Yeah? Just one album?
One.
What was it like working with him?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. But when he gets drunk, he thinks he's Ziggy.
Working with Bowie, Reed drew on the people who had inspired him in the first place, the hookers, the junkies, and cross-dressers of New York street life.
Holly came from Miami, FLA, hitchhiked away across USA, plucked her eyebrows on the way, shaved her legs, and then he was a she. She says, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Said, hey honey, take a walk on the wild side.
Walk on the Wild Side had been banned from the BBC, as it was banned in the United States. What kind of repressive culture would ban a song?
Candy came from out on the island. In the back room, she was everybody's darling.
There were versions in the United States that were only 14 seconds long. You just go bleep, 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 do-do-do-do-do-do, bleep, bleep, bleep.
Said, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. And the colored girls go do-do-do, do-do, do-do-do-do.
Again, that desire to stir things up and move them a bit was there.
Ladies and gentlemen, straight from his fantastically successful World Tour, including the United States.
Back in Britain, Bowie's fame continued to grow, but a sellout tour of the country ended unexpectedly when he gave a final concert at the Hammersmith Odeon.
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show
that we'll ever do. Thank you. Bye-bye, we love you.
Bowie retired Ziggy Stardust, but his meteoric success had spawned a whole new movement in Britain, known as glam rock. Not since the days of Little Richard had the charts seen so much flamboyant showbiz glitter. Even hardened old veterans like the Rolling Stones jumped on the bandwagon. By June 1974, Bowie was ready for something new, another assault on America.
I'm an alligator. Oh, mama, papa, calling for you. How was the space invaded? I'll be a rock and rollin' bitch for you. Keep your mouth shut.
For his Diamond Dogs tour across the United States, out went the makeup and stockings, and in came nicely cut soul boy suits.
I started writing songs city by city. The one that I immediately remember, of course, is Gene Genie, was definitely out of Detroit and focused around Iggy, an Iggy-type character, to be fully fair. It wasn't actually Iggy. But I wanted a new music, some more musical texture to go into it. And again, jazz was kind of rearing its head. And the juxtaposition of somebody who was right out of left field jazz, working with what we were doing, which was fairly conventional rock and roll, was really kind of interesting.
When I played the tune Time during the Diamond Dogs tour, it was a very theatrical tour, and the band was actually in the pit. It was very much like taking a musical Broadway on the road, a show on the road. And it had a 1920s and 30s setting feel, and I played like a swing-style piano, stride music it was called, in fact, with avant-garde touching. So you'll hear it was something like this. Hugh David.
Time is waiting in the wings. He speaks of senseless things. His script is you and me.
The new ingredient that helped sell Bowie when he returned to America was his revolutionary use of a full stage set. Bands had used light shows before, but this was the first time that a rock star had gone to a team of Broadway designers.
There were 4 towers that were the basis of the design, and they were made of newsprint that could be torn apart. So Bowie actually climbed one of these towers and destroyed the building during the concert. There was also a bridge across here, and during the concert, the bridge lowered down to the stage so that he could step off of it and sing downstage. And then at the end, it raised up again. And a cherry picker arm.
Ground control to Major Tom.
There was a door that opened up, and this cherry picker arm came forward
5, 4.
and went extended out over the first 6 rows of the audience.
1. Lift off.
The first time a cherry picker, I think, subsequently used by many others, was used in rock and roll. It was standing upright like that with an office chair on the top, and it was set in the window of a skyscraper, and I was sitting on the office chair on a telephone like some kind of male secretary. And the cherry picker started coming out, and it went out about 40 foot over the audience's heads. And because of the beautiful lighting that we had, you didn't see the rest of the cherry picker, you only saw the office chair suspended out there. At the end of the song finished, I put the telephone back in its cradle. The bloody thing didn't go back. So I was just stuck out there. So what the hell am I going to do out here? And the next song started, and so I think I did 3 or 4 songs on this chair. I thought, what am I going to do when the show finishes? I can't go anywhere. I'm going to have to jump. They'd better catch me. I thought, no, Iggy's already done that.
The press loved it, and the tour sold out in increasingly larger venues.
I've seen all the rest of Hollywood highs, best of the last, greatest star they ever had. Stiff on my legend, fumes said I'm made. Forget that I'm 50, 'cause you just got made.
I guess I'm living my fantasy.
What's your fantasy?
Bowie. He represents it all to me. Excitement, space. See, I'm just the space cadet, he's the commander.
You're so bad. Best I ever had. Oh, please,
I think eventually David Bowie had to change the androgyny, draggy, bisexual creature, as all those little American boys used to say, you know, fag music. He had to change because America just was not ready to completely let that come into the mainstream. Even Alice Cooper had to stop doing drag. Alice Cooper had to stop wearing ladies' slingback shoes. He had to stop wearing the false eyelashes and the women's old dresses and go more into the horror. People in America could understand horror and blood and dead babies, but they couldn't understand male-female sexuality, you know, bisexuality. They weren't ready to understand it.
Alice had indeed gotten into horror. He, too, had come to develop a bigger stage show.
Welcome to my nightmare. I think you're gonna like it. I think you're gonna feel it.
It got to a point where we were drawing enough people where we could see, well, we could do a football stadium. We could go ahead and do a football. But in order to fill that kind of a stadium, we had to do a bigger show. And we had the means to do it. We actually had the money to do it, so we did.
There were good commercial reasons for bringing theater into rock music. The economics of touring created a need to sell tens of thousands of tickets, to fill huge stadiums, and music alone wasn't always enough. One band from New York took it all to the logical extreme. With their pyrotechnic stage show, Kiss would sell more records than Bowie, Alice Cooper, and Lou Reed combined.
When we were growing up, I imagine there were many people who were drawing pictures of the race car that they wanted to own someday. I think we probably were different in that during school we were probably drawing pictures of what the ultimate stage would look like for a rock and roll show. The difference was we reached a point where we would take that drawing to somebody and say, build this.
This is the model of the Kiss Destroyer Tour in 1976. And one of the main elements here was to bring them up and over the amps and down these stage steps left and right, and so that they had energy that could attack the stage.
As far as the makeup went, let's face it, when you play someplace like this, you better make sure you can be seen by the last row. You want to know that somebody down there doesn't look on the stage and go, is that an ant? Or is that Paul? Is that Gene?
It was a sentiment that was to be shared by many in the business. If you wanted to be big, your set had to be big as well. Without a fleet of trucks big enough to transport a circus, no rock band was really in business. The whole industry was beginning to change. When the artist Guy Palart painted his fantasy portraits in 1973, he showed rock stars living in an increasingly showbiz world of cabaret and limousines.
There's an underlying unease here, definitely. You can feel it in every...
Meanwhile, Bowie himself was in trouble.
avenue.
Despite the success of Diamond Dogs, DeFree's heavy spending had finally bankrupted his company, and Bowie had developed an increasingly heavy cocaine habit. while living in Los Angeles.
Anything behind us?
Bowie went back to basics. No set, no frills, and a series of albums that saw him moving to a more sparse electronic sound. He also made a surprising move away from America.
Well, I've got personal reasons for going to Berlin were really to get me out of Los Angeles, which at the time I knew nobody but bad people, and I was doing nothing but bad stuff.
In fact, Berlin was in many ways the perfect place for Bowie. It had been a kind of spiritual home for this whole movement of rock and roll. Lou Reed recorded an album called Berlin without having been there.
In Berlin, by the wall.
The Doors covered Kurt Weill songs, and now Bowie was to be joined there by another survivor of the era.
Meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, Ladies und Gentlemen.
Iggy Pop had also been managed by Tony DeFries, and their partnership had ended in tears. He too needed a change.
I'd always been fascinated with the Germans. A lot of guys in rock and roll like the uniform, you know. And I went there with Bowie, and basically we just dug the whole idea that this was Berlin. This is a war zone. This is no man's land. And I had this book of Jim Morrison poetry, and one of the poems in it was about modern life as a journey by car.
I am the passenger, and I ride through the city's backsides. I see the stars come out of the sky, yeah, the bright and hollow sky. You know, it looks so good tonight.
Heroes and Lust for Life were both pure German products. The studio where those were made had a gun turret, lookout post for the guys who would watch to try to keep people in the East, straight out the window of the control booth, and sometimes they'd wave to us. It's a hell of an atmosphere.
Absolute Ruhe, bitte.
The studio, Hansa by the Wall, was a very wise choice. There was no mistaking the sound. We had a feeling on tape immediately.
I wish I could swim.
And I carry that sound throughout every overdub. There's a kind of a clanging metallic sound, which is David or I hitting a big metal ashtray.
Though nothing will keep us together.
We had a microphone about the customary 9 inches from his face. Then we had another microphone about 20 feet from himself. And then we had another microphone about 50 feet. And we put these things called gates, an electronic gate on each microphone, so that when he was singing like very quietly, like, you could be me and all that, like that, only this microphone was open. It had no gate on it. If he sang a little louder, the next microphone would open up with the gate, and that would make sort of this big splash of reverb. And then if he really sang loud, the back microphone would open up, and it would just open up this enormous sound.
Bowie's Heroes, released in the fall of 1977, foreshadowed the simpler, more direct sounds of punk and the electronic music of the 80s. It was, in a sense, also an epitaph for an era when rock stars had acted out extreme roles in an attempt to confront both themselves and their audiences. An era when, on stage at least, they could be heroes just for one day.
Coming up next on Rock and Roll.
Funk is rhythm and blues without rules.
James Brown puts the funk into soul music and becomes godfather to a whole new sound.
Sly Stone is like the bark of rhythm.
The music gets funky next on Rock and Roll. Funding for Rock and Roll is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the annual financial support of viewers like you. The Experience Music Project, a celebration of creativity and innovation through American popular music and culture, opening in Seattle in 1998. The National Endowment for the Arts.
And by the Boston Beer Company, brewers of Samuel Adams. Do you love beer?
And Radio Shack, official sponsor of the house that rock built, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland, Ohio.